Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the National Civil Rights Museum. Thank you guys for all braving the elements and the snow, but even the weather couldn't keep us from such a momentous opportunity here on MLK weekend. I'm Michael Wallace, Senior Editor of Grind City Media, and I want to thank you guys for joining us for this year's Intersection of Race and Sports panel discussion, both here at the National Civil Rights Museum, as well as online at grizzlies.com and civilrightsmuseum.org. I'm honored to be here for this discussion, as I am every year. This is one of my favorite assignments each and every season that we go through this. But first, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor for tonight, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Tennessee. We're glad to have Kevin Woods, president of the Memphis market, here with us, and I'd like to invite him to the stage now to share a few opening remarks. Kevin.
Good evening, everybody. Again, I'm excited to be at the King Day celebration as a representative of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. I want to quickly thank our partners and friends with Memphis Grizzlies, the National Civil Rights Museum, for again hosting today's event. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee is proud to sponsor this evening's panel on economic empowerment, as we are aware that economic empowerment and financial stability are vital to our overall well-being. I'm excited to hear from Caron Hamilton, Renee Montgomery, and our new Memphis Mayor, Paul Young, on this important topic. And I'm looking forward to my friend Russ facilitating this important conversation. I want to shout out to our Team Blue employees and volunteers who are always excited to lend a hand and volunteer and support the King Day activities. I want to thank you all for attending. And thanks again to the National Civil Rights Museum staff for always putting on an excellent event, and today will be no difference. Thank you for coming out this evening.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to Blue Cross Blue Shield. As I mentioned earlier, we're here at the National Civil Rights Museum, the historic site of where Dr. Martin Luther King spent his final days, and what evolved into the first civil rights museum in the country. Since 2015, the Grizzlies have collaborated with the National Civil Rights Museum on discussions at the intersection of race and sports. Every year we have explored a variety of compelling topics with esteemed panelists, and this year is definitely no different. But before we get started, I'm gonna go off script here as well, because a lot of people put a lot of work in making this happen every day that will never, ever, ever seek the credit or want the credit. And that starts with Grizzlies director, Carly Lyons. She's sitting up here at the front. Through hail, sleet, or snow, she's always accessible, she's always pushing, and she always works so hard behind the scenes to make this event happen. And also it's under the direction of Grizzlies Vice President John Pugliese in the back. And Grizzlies President Jason Wexler seated right here as well. And from the league office, one other person, I've just known him as Mr. Charlie, so I want to thank Mr. Charlie. I'm sure if I gave his last name, that means people will come looking for him, so I'll leave it at that. But thank you a lot, Charlie, for doing what you do each and every year. All right. And as I said, we're streaming online. To those who aren't able to get here, down here to downtown, we're streaming online as well, so make sure you continue to follow the stream for this fantastic event. And it's my honor to welcome our moderator for this evening, the president of the National Civil Rights Museum, Dr. Russ Wigington.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And thank you all for being here. It is my honor to moderate this conversation. I want to express our gratitude for our relationship with the Grizzlies, who've been a longtime partner and supporter of the National Civil Rights Museum, and this fantastic new partnership that we have with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Kevin has been a wonderful friend and guide as we have begun our relationship with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and it is unfolding beautifully. We are in the middle of a wonderful renovation to our Founders Park under their sponsorship, and we couldn't be more proud of that relationship. Thank you for your commitment to us. I also want to acknowledge that with us in the audience is one of our sports legacy recipients and honorees, Mr. Ozzie Smith. I won't say a whole lot about Ozzie Smith, but let's just say they didn't call him the Wizard for nothing. He's someone who made playing defense exciting and special in his days as a player. As importantly, has modeled humility and been a wonderful gentleman in the St. Louis community and beyond for many years. Okay, so I want to take a moment and introduce our panelist, and then I'm going to go have a seat. Caron Hamilton is a Memphis-based interior designer and lifestyle blogger behind the brand Newbie Interiors, winner of HGTV's Design Star. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. You can do that. And she's a star of HGTV's Reno, My Rental. Her work, story, and content around design, branding, and elevating the everyday are featured and referenced in Architectural Digest, Southern Living, Essence, Domino, and more. Caron utilizes her design education and vast experience to discover the beauty in all things and help others find beauty in what surrounds them every day. And as you can tell, she's a dynamic dresser too. Yeah. Also joining us is Renee Montgomery, WNBA great, Atlanta Dream co-owner and activist. Renee is a West Virginia native with 3 girls' state basketball championships, graduated from University of Connecticut as a 2-time All-American in 2009, and played on an undefeated team that went on to win the NCAA title that same year. She was drafted 4th overall in the WNBA and is a 2-time WNBA champion, while also being named All-Star and 6th Woman of the Year in her 11-year pro career. In broadcasting, she serves as a sports analyst and hosts numerous shows, including WNBA Weekly, and her own podcast, Montgomery & Company. After sitting out the 2020 WNBA season to focus on social justice reform, Montgomery decided to retire in February of 2021. Later that month, she became co-owner and vice president of the Atlanta Dream, making her the first WNBA player to become a partner and executive of a team in WNBA history. That's Renee Montgomery. And we're also happy to welcome Mayor Paul Young to tonight's discussion. Paul Young is a Memphian, father of 2, husband of Dr. Jamila Smith Young, and the son of Pastor Diane Young and the late Bishop William Young of the Memphis Healing Center. He has spent the last decade improving quality of life in Memphis by advancing housing security and fostering healthy neighborhoods where families can thrive. Growing up in the Oak Haven neighborhood, Young learned at an early age that there were 2 Memphises, one ripe with opportunity and prosperity, and another lacking resources and safe neighborhoods. Memphis has grown under Young's leadership, and our economy is stronger. But moving the city forward has required strategic investments in public safety, infrastructure, and the potential of our greatest asset, our people. In October of 2023, Paul Young was elected mayor of Memphis. Please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Pretty impressive.
Okay. So just to set a little context, we are in the National Civil Rights Museum. This is the place where Dr. King took his last breaths. And this is the place that Dr. King came to, this city, and stayed at the Lorraine Motel. He came to this city on his way to Washington, D.C. for the Poor People's Campaign. Despite all of his advisors recommending that he not get involved, not get sidetracked, if you will, because he needed to go to Washington, D.C. and lead the Poor People's Campaign. But Dr. King said, those sanitation workers in Memphis who simply said, I am a man, who were working full time and still qualified for government assistance, they are the Poor People's Campaign. I have to do this. So ladies and gentlemen, that's where we are. And that fight, that commitment, that focus on economic justice and economic empowerment, we're still having those kind of conversations in our society, and we want to have that type of conversation tonight. So I'm honored to be with you all and the various perspectives that you have. I look forward to getting your insight and some of your experiences. So I'm going to start off with our newly elected mayor, Paul Young. And Paul, I want to ask you to talk about in the spirit of in the role that you're now in, helping our city identify opportunity for people to make viable wages by which they can invest back in the community, but also create possibilities and hope for their futures. How do we do that?
Yeah, I think, when I look at Memphis, I see a sea of opportunity. We were recently named the largest minority city per capita, black city per capita in the country. And I have often said that we should use that as a strength, as an advantage, as a claim that nobody else in the country can make, as a means to bring more resources to our community. You pointed out earlier that when Dr. King came here, he was on the precipice of the Poor People's Campaign. He was in the early stages. But across this country, we still have far too many people that don't have enough means to get through day to day. In our city, we have a lot of conversations about public safety. And what I tell people about crime is that crime is the output. So yes, we got to do all the things to address public safety and support our officers and make sure that we hold people accountable, but we also have to work on prevention and intervention. That's the economic game. If we give more economic opportunities, if we find ways to supplement housing, if we find ways for our employers to find vouchers and things that they can provide as additional income, if we are supporting entrepreneurs so that they can start new businesses, finding new streams of revenue to support those, that's how we change our community. And I think cities across the country would utilize that model. And that's what we're trying to do here in Memphis, is we're trying to take our strengths and leverage those into opportunities for the people.
Sure, thank you. And we'll circle back on some more of your ideas and possibilities for how that might unfold. Renee, your phenomenal career speaks for itself. But in 2020, when you made the decision to step away and then ultimately to retire, I think it opened up a whole new possibilities of speaking for yourself, if you will. And could you speak to a little bit to what was your guide to make the shift as you did, and what clearly was the kind of conviction that you had about just social justice, civil and human rights and social justice. What was your process in arriving at those decisions and doing the work that you did?
Yeah, it wasn't a quick decision, it wasn't like I just woke up and was like, this is what I'm doing. I arrived at that decision, I think, because kind of similar to everyone, when 2020 was going on, we almost had the impression that we're way further along than we thought we were. That's kind of what, well, for myself, it was like, man, I can't believe this is happening. Like, not that I was thinking that we had eradicated racism. Like, we know it's there, we see it. I was born and raised in West Virginia, so I understand there's a certain level of racism, but to see it that bold and that just in your face, we're watching it on national TV. That's what led to the conviction, in a sense of, it's like, okay, so how can I be, like, I'm one of the players, if you see me play, I'm passionate. Like, when I'm playing, I'm passionate, I'm into it. I know.
Oh, we've seen you play.
Okay, listen, I know my scout, I know your scout, I know my scout, I know everybody's scout. Like, I overstudy, I over-prepare. I just want to make sure that I'm my best self every day, because usually when you're a captain of a team, you never want to be the one that somebody has to say, oh, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You're trying to tell me what to do. So I didn't feel like I could be that person, because I felt like I would be distracted. My thoughts would be like, if I'm going to we called it the wubble. It was the bubble for the NBA, but we called ours the wubble. If I'm going to the wubble, how am I going to be boots on the ground in the A? And if I'm going to the wubble and I'm thinking about everything going on, well, I might be caught up trying to plan and do other things somewhere else, and then I'm just not locked in. So I came to the decision on, I didn't want to have a disservice to my team. I didn't want to do a disservice to my teammates, my coaches, and I just felt like I needed to be in Atlanta. And so, I opted out on social media. That's why I always talk about your platform. The platform is the medium in a sense too. Like, the March on Washington happened, and even when you see the videos now and see how many people, it's like, wow, like that many people traveled to Washington to be there live. Times have changed now, and Twitter is a way where you can use your platform to just reach people. And so for me, I was like, all right, well, listen, if I don't have nothing else, I got Twitter. So I opted out on Twitter, and a lot of people had asked me, like, well, why didn't you just opt out? Why did you say why you opted out? Like, that was one of the big things. Like, a lot of players opted out for personal reasons, and that's, like, rightfully so. Like, that's your choice. But for me, I felt like that's part of the message. Like, me opting out, I'm not just opting out, I'm opting out for a specific reason, and this is the reason. So I had a mom that was living in Detroit during the Detroit riots. Both of my parents went to an HBCU. My mom went on to teach at that HBCU for 30 years. So I had a lot of previous knowledge in my head already about, like, oh, I know what's going on. And so, my family is right there. They were, which is crazy, because they was down for me to not do my job, and I don't know where the check, like, they was down for me not to do my job, and everybody stood 10 toes down, and my whole family like, yeah, we'll be all right, we'll be good, and that's what it was.
Yeah. No, that's a powerful explanation. I'd love to ask a follow-up, and it really shifts over into just how you clearly think and how you go about your business. Connect that to your work as being a part owner of a franchise, right? I mean, this is
the dream. I mean, because our team is named the Atlanta Dream, so it's not. I mean, we were named by the actual city. The people in the city voted on options, and they decided to name it after Dr. King's speech. So for me, it felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Honestly, I didn't even have a plan to do that. That's the thing. When I first opted out, it was like, okay, so now what? You know what I mean? Like, I'm looking around, and so we decided that we're like, well, everybody, this is a time where there's a lot of sadness, and so we wanted to be a little beacon of happiness and hope. So we were like, well, let's throw a pop-up block party at Centennial Olympic Park. It was for Juneteenth, and we just told the people, like, the people were already protesting there, so there was already groups there, and then a lot more people came. And that's where we started to realize, like, you don't really have to have a plan other than we know that we want better. We know the things that need to get better. So let's just all get together, talk about it, do something about it. And so and then with the Atlanta Dream, shouts to Larry G and Suzanne A. Baird. Those are the other the co-owners on the team. So like-minded. The reason that Larry bought the team was specifically because he felt like a team named after Dr. King needs to be speaking truth to power. And so he didn't only just feel that way, you got to open your checkbook. You ain't just buying no teams out here, so he really put his money where his mouth was. And so when I was looking at all those mugshots, there were a lot of white people in the mugshots in there. And so I think about those allies that you may get overlooked, but I'm excited to be able to stand next to people that I know would have been allies then and now.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful story. And one of the things we try to lift up here at the museum is reflecting on allyship has always been at play. It's a when you, even when you're in the initial gallery, when you come into the museum, we talk about abolitionists in the 1800s, right? And so this notion of people coming together and is a powerful one, and it's one that's always the case, and it's one that's necessary. Carmian, as a entrepreneur and business owner and person who has worked and led in spaces, the design space in particular, you know, you're unusual. You are atypical, if you will. I'm sure there have been some barriers and some stories that you could share around how you've gotten to the place you are now. But could you speak to some of that from a way to inspire some folks who want to be you, and then in this whole notion of economic mobility, can you speak to what your journey's been?
Yes, it is. It is not lost on me that the foundation of my career is in beautifying environments. And if you get down to it, it's essentially the spaces that we're in most often, and most often we're at home. And it is also not lost on me that only 2% of the interior design industry is minority or Black, especially Black women. And we also are of the minority when it comes to home ownership, and of the minority in every other aspect of our existence in this country. I went to college to be a physical therapist. I was an athlete. I played basketball. I turned down basketball scholarships because I loved it and was great at it, but heart wasn't in it. But I didn't want to separate myself from the physicality of the sport, so physical therapy is what it was. I had no idea that interior design even existed as a career, as a hobby, anything, until I was actually on campus after losing my academic scholarship and becoming an RA to help pay for school. That was the first time I had my own dorm room, and was the first time I decorated a space for myself. And I had a friend walk into that space and say, "You should really check out the interior design department," and had no idea what it was, but after speaking to the dean of the department, changed my major that day. Thankfully, physical therapy, the track pushed me way farther along than necessary when it came to completing my degree, so I actually finished school in 3.5 years with a Bachelor of Science in interior design, which is also unheard of. But I went into healthcare immediately after college and understood, and I learned a lot in college, but understood the true meaning of our environments impacting our well-being when you design a hospital, a physical therapy clinic, a nursing home, a dementia ward, and seeing how certain colors and even the influence of plant life being in a space, how that impacts people and how well they are. And then you think about that on a broader scale and how many people don't have access to a safe home environment. And then you think about if you're not safe at home, how that leads to you acting at work or kids acting at school. And it's this cycle of sadness, ultimately, the disenfranchisement of what your life is if you just don't have a safe home environment. And when I decided to start my own business, taking on the responsibility of showing people not just a pretty space, but understanding what it means to live well. And beauty is subjective, but wellness is a standard that everybody should be living by. And so that is a mission of mine in interior design. It's a mission of mine as an owner of a cocktail bar or a media company and several other things, but I want people to know what living well means, and for the cores of my business, it starts at home.
Yeah, I find that really fascinating because when we're talking about economic empowerment and you're talking about living well, like the intersection of those is it's actually kind of a fascinating thing to think about. Want to come back to you for a moment, Paul. And one of the themes that has come out already is this notion of partnership and this notion of collaboration and dare I say, working across lines, if you will, and from all perspectives. Could you speak to some of your early thinking on the importance of that and how that might unfold in this particular case in the city of Memphis, but maybe it could be a lesson for some other communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think collaboration is really, really important because we can't achieve the big goals that we have for our community alone. That we have to go together, whether we're talking racially, gender, partisanship. Even when I talk about the campaign trail because it was so recently, just last year. But one of the things that I tried to do was have a unifying message because if we look at politics nationally, there are, you're on the left or the right and you yell and you argue about your point, but nobody's listening. And the reality is most people are somewhere in the middle, left or center or right or center. But at the end of the day, everybody just wants to be able to go home and take care of their families. And so what I want Memphis to do is figure out how do we achieve that? Because the reality is we have far too many people where it's very difficult for them to just be able to take care of their household, for them to just be able to go home to a safe, quality housing space. And when we talk about it from that perspective, it's not about left or right. It's about right and wrong.
Yeah.
And everybody deserves a fair shot. And I think the more we can drive home that dialogue as a community, the further we're going to get.
Sure, no, I appreciate that. Dr. King had many famous words that are referenced, and certainly on King Day, there will be a lot of that. Yeah. We tend to think about him every day here at the National Civil Rights Museum. One of my favorite statements that he made was actually very simple, and it was essentially, all labor has dignity. And I think the power of that could still resonate today. And this is for the question that will be for any of you all. Could you speak to some of what you would consider the foundational pieces around what in particular we should be speaking to our youth about as it relates to labor and the connection to dignity, and very fundamentally, how does one achieve financial or knowledge, right? Just in a very basic kind of way. Could you speak to what you would want a 10 or 12-year-old to know, if you will, around labor and dignity and knowledge about finances or financial stability or viability?
I'll start. I mean, I always say it's hard to be what you can't see. And so from a city perspective, my goal is to ensure that our young people have images of a lot of different fields of job and careers so that they understand how many different paths there are. Hopefully one day they'll be entrepreneurs and start companies and employ more people. And I want them to come from the basic perspective of we want the wages that we pay to be fair. And over the course of their careers, even starting when they're young, getting jobs, they will see that each job deserves a dignified paycheck. We shouldn't have to have people that have 3 or 4 jobs just to be able to keep the lights on. And I think that comes from experience. We want our young people to be able to experience that.
Sure.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm athlete here, but I like stats. I like, like in the athlete world, there's a saying like men lie, women lie, them numbers don't lie though. So I like stats where, you said less than 2% is the design for the minority community. Well, if you go into venture capitalism, I did that for a little while, less than 5% is the minority community. If you go to women's sports, less than 15% media coverage. So start hitting people with the facts. Just hit them with the straight facts of the case. Like, well, why do you think that is? Because when you're younger, you don't, like, we've almost grown to understand that, yes, minority women are at the bottom of every totem pole when it comes to salary, access, opportunities, the bottom, right? So when you talk to younger kids and they do all these different experiences with kids, they haven't really figured out prejudice yet, a lot of them. So you might be like, okay, we're gonna give her $2 and we're gonna give you $50 and y'all are gonna do the same thing. Kids will naturally be like, what? Wait a minute, like, we doing the same thing? Why is he getting $50 and I'm only getting $2? That's what I think you need to do at a younger age, because that's before the bias is set in. People our age, we know it. So it's like, we know all the stats about all the different fields. Start telling them, because I think then they'll start to understand, yeah, for the exact same job, y'all are doing the same thing. She's making $2, you're making $50. Those young kids can kind of see it, grasp it. So I like to hit kids with just the actual truth of the matter, hit them with the stats and the analytics. Like, this is what, Taraji on The Color Purple, she's doing a media tour right now. She talked about, like, I've worked on some of the biggest shows on the biggest networks and got paid pennies to the dollar, and we know her, she's famous, and she had to speak out though. She had to give us the facts. So now I'm passing on her facts, because I'm like, you mean to tell me Cookie Lyons from Empire ain't out here making a coin? Like, I thought that was wild. And then Terrence Howard, it's like you hear it, so then it's like, now I can't not know it.
Yep.
So when you equip people with the facts and the truth and the just stats of the numbers, I think that'll be good, because kids I feel like at this social media age where there's information everywhere, almost all of us, we want facts. And we want to know their facts, we want to know the truth. And so I just think equip kids with the truth.
I love it.
Agreed. Agreed. Facts. One, I believe that kids need to understand that money is a tool, but it is a tool that opens a lot of doors beyond just paying your bills. But in order to pay those bills, you have to understand that a job, you have to start somewhere. Not everyone is going to come straight out of the gate being LeBron James or a Taraji. Like, you have to start somewhere, and everywhere you start is a building block to get to wherever you want to go. And understanding that labor, no matter what that labor is, I know my first job was a cashier at a grocery store in West Memphis, Arkansas, and I don't even remember what I got paid. I'm pretty sure it was $6 an hour. But understanding, I know that's not my job forever. I just need to get into the marketplace. I need to have some level of experience in working with people. So getting kids to understand, like, no, your first job isn't going to be, an executive of a firm somewhere. Like, just understand the importance of working. Or come up with something of your own. We live in a country, as terrible as it is, but the capitalistic society that we built, you can make money off of anything. A lot of people don't like to do things for themselves. What is this thing or service you can provide that alleviates people from doing something that they don't want to do? And you can do that at 6 years old, 26 years old, or whatever. But money is a tool, but you have to understand getting in on the ground floor from anywhere is the beginning of that journey.
Sure. Thank you for that. And you've already hinted at, well, more than hinted, but you've already referenced the disparity across gender lines, not just in sports, but in so many other spaces. As pioneers, if you will, do you feel, either one of you feel a certain sense of responsibility from the standpoint of modifying that and helping correct that too long-standing practice of economic disparity across gender lines?
For me, how whenever somebody says you're the first of something, my first thought was like, okay, well, this has to go well, because I don't want it to be the last of something. So I feel like that's the responsibility that I carry, being a co-owner and vice president, because a lot of times, for a very long time, when you saw athletes, we see these athletes that are legends and they have amazing careers, and then after their career, you enter into another workforce, because athletes, our careers end at 30, 40 if you're lucky.
Yeah, I am struggling with this whole retirement thing.
Yes, I'm retired. It's crazy to me too.
You are retired.
But then you enter the workforce, and people would literally act like athletes have no prior experience. Athletes have no anything to offer. And it's like, you mean the athlete that was disciplined enough every day to wake up at 5 a.m., put in this many hours in the gym, perfected this craft, worked on this weakness, can take constructive criticism, can work well with others, can be a team player. This person can't fit in your ecosystem in some way. And so I found that to be a little bit shocking. So for me to be the first former player that became an owner and executive, because the executive part is what I'm addressing. It's like athletes are so equipped to, I don't care what job it is. If you give me a group of athletes and y'all tell us the rules of engagement on what we need to do, boy, I'm gonna bet on us. Like, I'm just saying, like, I'm gonna bet that we're gonna figure it out together. We're gonna listen, we're gonna work as a team. And so I just feel like for me, that is the responsibility. It's like, okay, I'm an athlete that is now in a corporate world too. I didn't just go into I'm in a corporate world where regarding my last email, like these type of things that you're typing in there, that world. And so it's like, wow, okay. It's like, I must have missed that. And you reply all, it's like, but we figure it out. So I feel like, I feel like with me, I figured it out in the Atlanta Dream.
Reply all is the take home message. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Oh, my bad. I said everybody, but I said something good, so it's great. But it's like, with me, I wanted to make sure that if we're looked at previously as, okay, when you finish playing, what are you going to do now other than work at a car dealership? It's like, no, we can do any job. So for me, I hold that responsibility. I hold it heavy because if I'm the blueprint, it has to go well.
That's great.
Yes, I have also taken on the responsibility in the space that I am in. Having come from a background that didn't know interior design existed as a career, I have made it a responsibility to share what I do and how it's done as openly and candidly as I can. So my social media platform is where I do that. I've built it. I've been a blogger for 12 years. I've been on Instagram since its inception and essentially have built my career from that space. But my responsibility is to, one, let Black women, Black men, Black people like me understand that this is a viable career. And two, for kids in school so that they understand this is a career before they even have to make the decision in a space like college to know that this is a pathway as well. So visiting elementary schools and high schools here in the city and spending time with them, showing them what I do. But also it is my responsibility to show people that are not Black how Black people live and how we also live well. It is giving outsiders a perspective to humanize the Black experience, which is typically the problem in our differences. You don't see other people as human, not necessarily seeing us as subhuman, but you don't realize how similar we are. So I open up my home, I share my family, I share what it's like being a band mom and how I'm juggling all of these 32 things because I'm just like any other woman that's 38 years old with a family and a career. So it is my responsibility to not only show my career, but also my life and existence, so to humanize me from the next person.
Yeah, that's great. That notion of humanity is critical, and that shows up, if you will, in so many parts of the experience we try to provide here at the museum. One of the things that I think about a lot is how, towards the end of Dr. King's life, how he had grown as a leader in his ideas and philosophy, like you would expect. I mean, we underestimate or forget how young of a man he was, entering into the public eye and was in that space for a relatively short period of time. And his ideas about things began to change. He became much more nuanced in how he thought about the world, its challenges and its possibilities. And he got more radical. And he made more people uncomfortable, such that at the time of his death, significant disapproval rating in our country. Now, tomorrow's his birthday, and we're going to celebrate him. Nobody's going to want to talk about how unpopular he was, but we talk about it at the National Civil Rights Museum. And I believe we've got to get uncomfortable if we're going to take on economic injustice. What have you done, or how do you think about stepping into this discomfort, if you will, in your respective work? All of you are in spaces where laying it on the line every day, it comes with the territory. How do you do that? How do you step into these uncomfortable spaces because you have to in the context of economic justice? Y'all didn't see that coming, did you?
No, it's a great question. And I think I like the way Renee framed it when she said using data. And for Memphis, because this is where I am, for Memphis, all we have to do is look at the data. If you look at the data, we have the most black people per capita in any city in the country, but we also have significant poverty. We also have significant issues with crime and public safety. And it all goes to economics. And so using the data to make the case to all of Memphis, wealthy and not wealthy, that we have to do things differently, that we have to find a way to grow the economic base in our black neighborhoods, in our black and brown neighborhoods, in our communities, and making the case that that's not taking money away from those that have, it's growing the pie for all. Because when those neighborhoods, when those individuals have more resources, your companies are gonna grow as well. And so to me, it's all about making a data-based, rational argument for how we can do things differently. Whether it's looking at the developments that we do and the makeup of the investor pool and who gets the wealth on the back end, to the contractors that work on the projects, to how we spend money as a city government, and then relaying that to the corporations that are spending major dollars in our community and ensuring that they understand the value of investing in minority businesses. Those are things that we have to do as a city if we want to turn the page.
Thank you, Paul.
And I would say part of it is demystifying what economic development is, like money in general. I'm a huge proponent of just talking about money. I do not care about people knowing how much money I make, what job did this. You have to expose other people to money, even at a minimum wage basis. If there are 6 people working at McDonald's and this one's been paid $6.50 and this one's being paid $8.50 and they're doing the same thing, if you're talking to each other, we now have a weapon to go to management and say, no, you're not going to cut his pay, you're going to increase mine. So talking about money in general is something that I'm wildly a fan of, and I love doing it with my people in my sector. How do you charge for this design job? How do you charge this brand? How much does this brand pay? Did they pay you $30,000? Well, they paid me $15,000. So talking about money and demystifying money, and also understanding you can't just tell people to go get a job that pays more money to increase their wealth. That's not always possible for someone. So what are the things that I can do with the money that I'm making to build wealth? What are some things that I can do today besides go ask my employer for more money? What can I do for my family? And so those kinds of conversations, what is wealth? And those are the loud conversations that are necessary.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
You made me think about something when you said talk about it, because everybody talks about how, I don't know if people know, but on the Friends cast on their last season or their last contract negotiation, they all made $1 million per episode. We all know that stat, but the way that they made $1 million per episode was they all got together, they started talking to each other like, how much you making? How much you making? oh, the cap was at 1 million per episode. So then they was like, let's all make $1 million or we're all leaving kind of situation. To what your point was, I wish Living Single did that. But side note, but that's what they did. That's what they did. They went to each other, they talked about it, and then they stood in solidarity. We talked about collaboration, partnerships. And so I think that honestly, it's the education. I think that a lot of people don't actually understand money. There's just like, just the term money. When you get your first check, a lot of people are like, what? Who is robbing me? Yes. And then it's like, wow, somebody didn't even tell you, you gotta pay. You gotta pay Uncle Sam. As soon as you get your money, they gonna get their money. Like you have to, but people don't know
And you
money.
might get the opportunity to pay a little bit more later.
Okay, you know what I'm saying? You gotta pay.
Yeah.
But the fact of the shock when you see people get, because I've played 11 years in the WNBA, when the rookies come in and they get that first check and they already spent the whole check, but then they didn't get the whole check. It's like, no, baby, listen, somebody didn't tell you. So I think people have to understand, I think that the education of money is starting to happen more now when people are trying to apply for housing and apply for things. And they're like, wow, I'm getting denied. And then they start to calculate how much they would need to even get to the place of putting a down payment. And then they start to realize, man, that would take me this many. And then they start to break down the actual money aspect of living. Because living is, there's making money, but we've seen even the most wealthy of people make millions of dollars and go broke. Yeah, like, so just making the money isn't the whole piece of the pie. You have to understand money and how it will depreciate over time or grow over time, how you have to pay this, you have to pay that. So I'm just a big fan, again, of just education is the way, because to your point, you gotta work. So that's the first thing, you have to work, but people have to understand what we're working for, what we're working towards, and who we're working with.
Thank you for that. It's a interesting time in our society around just thinking about the broadening, if you will, of careers and opportunities and types of jobs, and we know it feels like it's one of those moments that comes around, it may be every century or so, where what jobs are going to be in the next 20 years, if you will. How there's a lot of data, as we know, about how jobs are changing. What are some things that you think we need to do as a society to make sure those who don't have instant access, what do you recommend we do to make sure they're ready, if you will, for their opportunity when it comes? Because we're not seeing if you just look at the data, there's not the progress, if you will, that one would have expected over time for the last generation. What are some things that we need to do differently, if you will, as this next generation embarks on a world of new jobs and new areas and new opportunities potentially?
I would say it all starts with education, and educating and training for the jobs of the next generation. I was at a conference a couple months ago, and I was seeing some of the things that they were doing with just the chat GPT and the AI and all these different things. It literally wrote a job description after you gave it a few lines. And so there's going to be incredible advances with artificial intelligence and technology. And I think that we need our young people to understand that world and that universe, and they need to be able to be nimble with technology and all the STEM programming. I think it's also important to think about different hustles, different things that you can do to earn revenue that's not just working for an employer, but also being able to use your own skills. Interior design, being able to find things that you can do that it can add value that really only people can do. And I don't have all those answers, but I know that has to be a part of the solution, looking at the way things are going.
No, sure. I mean, to that point, first of all, that's my son. He better be in that STEM stuff, because I'm like, somebody got to control the computers. It's controlling everything. But
right.
To that point, I think local is really the new global. I think we get caught up in, and even myself included, I literally go to Amazon for everything. And it's like, I love it, and then I'm scared of it all at once, in a sense of like, it's like I got a box coming every day, and I forgot what I ordered. It's like, oh, this, you know? So it's like, we have to build local, I really think, because guess who's working at those local places? Like, if you're getting everything offline and it's from somewhere else, it's like, well, your local community, they don't have a job. You're not getting anything local. Like, so I think that just local, because even now when you look at local shops, and I know the pandemic had a lot to do with it, but a lot of local shops are closed, shopping malls closed, just, and like I said, I'm part of the problem too, because the online ordering is so simple, but we almost have to start being conscious about building up our local communities, because that's who your local people are going to be working at, and your local jobs are going to be. So everybody's not going to have an online job. You know, right now, you know, working from home, working remote is a thing, but you can see that there's hybrids coming, but everybody's not going to be able to do that. So I think one of the ways to just start building back is local.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I agree with both. Education is a huge portion of it. I know here in the state of Tennessee, you have the opportunity, if you graduate from high school, you have 2 free years of community college. And I know most people aren't taking advantage of that. And in that, you have access to education for what's to come. But I actually am of the mind where we should be influencing our youth to pay more attention to jobs that have been around for years and years and years that are actually being the most high-paying jobs that are of trades. Like, we need people putting power lines on the poles. We need people in infrastructure, civil engineering, construction. Like, the people, there aren't going to be machines tomorrow that build skyscrapers. Mm-hmm. There will have to be people on the ground, human beings that have to, one, control the computers, but yes, put these rivets and weld all these things. So in your statement earlier, there's dignity in all labor. Mm-hmm. Like, that particular labor showing that there's dignity, and being an electrician, they get paid the most money in almost any construction job nowadays. So being able to show the dignity in the jobs of the past, because those jobs will be around forever. They're not going anywhere. So yes, internet can crash, and everybody that has an online job can be of the past at that particular point, but who's going to be out there making sure the cable lines are dug and run and all those things? So I want children and the future, and especially speaking to local, like my community, the people I can touch, I want them to understand what's important in those hands-on trade jobs.
Well, we're in the middle of a significant renovation here at the museum, and what I can promise you is those jobs still pay a lot of money. Thank you all so much. We know that Dr. King would have been 95 years old tomorrow, and his impact on the world will never be forgotten. The work that you all are doing now is so important and will not be forgotten either. Your passion, your knowledge, and your commitment to being not just successful from a monetary standpoint, but being prideful and being purposeful about your work and making our society better is obvious and very much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking our wonderful panelists for this conversation.
And the hostess with the mostest.
Yes. Good job, host.
To him.
And again, I'd like to thank, one at a time, Dr. Wigington for all that he does as a curator, leading this wonderful, wonderful museum. And as I said in my opening remarks, it was the first National Civil Rights Museum, and that means something. All the work he put in. He didn't ask me to do this, but I will give a plug to the museum. This is just one of many events that they put on every single time that they have an opportunity to. But I happened to be logged in for one of their book signings. And Lita McCullough-Seletsky came on a couple of months ago and did a appearance here for The Kneeling Man, her book. I'm in chapter 10 of this book. and it was one where it was an audience and also online. Phenomenal book. She's the daughter of one of the men who first responded to Dr. King in the infamous shot, fatal shot right upstairs. So I'm in chapter 10. This is my first book of January, and they have a wonderful gift shop right here too. So for all of those online, it's nationalcivilrightsmuseum.org. And if you happen to be here, please frequent that bookstore because there's all kind of phenomenal gifts there. Also want to thank Renee Montgomery. There's no surprise that she's successful in everything that she does, right? I mean, just the joy, just the energy and the passion that you go about living your life. I mean, it's an inspiration to so many. So please keep doing what you're doing. All right. Obviously, Caron Hamilton, and for all of your creativity and what you're doing in the entrepreneurial space and the creativity, being a shining example of our local products and the local talent in Memphis in this area and what we can aspire to. And obviously, Mayor Young, I know for a fact that our city is in good hands, forward-thinking hands. Continue to do what you're doing. You're a blessing as well. Thank you so much for putting your family at the forefront of everything that you do as well, too. And I'm gonna ask for a favor, man. When you send those snow trucks out tomorrow, start at my street. All right? I also want to thank our sponsor again, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, and Kevin Woods for being a part of this remarkable night. I want to thank our in-person as well as our virtual audience as well. And please join us Monday at FedEx Forum or tune in to Bally Sports Southeast at 3:30 for our Earl Lloyd Sports Symposium, Sports Legacy Symposium, where we will recognize Renee Montgomery, Calvin Hill, who joined us here. Thanks a lot for joining us, Mr. Hill. Alex English. Is Alex in the building? I know he was in the building. He's not in the room right now. And Ozzie Smith. Ozzie told me he was going to backflip his way up here, but I'm not going to let him do that. You know, I'm trying to get him home safely so he can get home tomorrow. But thank you, guys. And then obviously our game tomorrow against the Golden State Warriors. It's our MLK celebration game. Tips off at 5 o'clock, but all of the action starts at 3:30 with the symposium. Thank you. Everyone get home safely, and good night.